and you have read and write all across your district-wide. I love that you pointed out those UDL principles that are kind of built in with inside of read and write. Is that what you were also envisioning for something like OrbitNote? Would you want that to be utilized across all of your students and them all have access to OrbitNote?
Well, we currently have read and write as a district-wide license. So all staff and all students have access to that. As I had shared, because so many of our students have iPads, the elementary and then through our middle school up to 8th grade, that would be wonderful. So I'd like to see how the tool works. And then, of course, we would pitch what that might look like in terms of a district-wide license as well. And then if that's a no-go, then we can revisit what other options might be available for the students that really require it.
Gotcha. Okay, that's really helpful for me to know. From my team, any other questions that we might have before I get us started? I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Great.
I'm good on my end, thanks.
Beautiful. And I will say this is my first time on Teams as well. So will you all let me know if you can see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Yep.
Amazing. Awesome. And then I'll ask you that same thing when we hop back over onto my iPad because I have to kind of unshare and reshare utilizing my iPad. But wonderful. Okay, let's go ahead and get started today. Thank you so much for giving me that context. That's really helpful to me to know that setting that this will be utilized with and the different grade bands that utilize those different devices. So I'm going to go ahead and do an overview of OrbitNote, kind of what it is and what it brings to the table. Then I'll jump in and do that live site demonstration of OrbitNote on my MacBook. I'm currently utilizing Google Chrome. That's just what I feel most comfortable with. But the beauty of OrbitNote is that it's really meant to work wherever your students are working. So if they are utilizing Microsoft Edge, if they're utilizing Google Chrome, or if they're utilizing Safari on their MacBooks, it's going to look very similar. It's going to have the same functionality across the top. So it does perform really similarly across all of those different settings. And that is really intentional because we want our students, especially our students with some of those struggles with those executive functioning skills, we don't want them to have to piecemeal different products together. Go ahead, Taylor.
Sandy, do you have a recommended browser that the district does use when it comes to how they access the internet?
Yes, so they're using the Chrome extension on the MacBooks. They use our learning management platform is Canvas. And then for the iPad, they are using Safari browser.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. That's helpful. So I will go ahead and show us. I am going to pull over an LMS integration. I do have Google Classroom up, but it works the exact same way as in Google Classroom. So you just import any of those PDFs and it will automatically open up inside of OrbitNote. And then your students will be able to input their responses, annotate on the page, have all of their accessibility settings, and then they will be able to turn it in back inside of Canvas, very similar to how I'm going to show us inside of Google Classroom today. But that's really helpful for us to know as well, just to know that integration with that LMS that your district utilizes and prioritizes. So thank you for that. So I'm going to do that live site demonstration inside of Google Chrome. Then, like I said, I'll have to unshare, switch over to my iPad, and then reshare, but I will do that iPad demonstration. It does have almost the same functionality. It does have a couple of additional supports built into the iPad, so I will make sure to point those out when we get into that iPad demonstration portion of the day today. But number 4, please don't wait to the end for your questions. If you have questions, please make sure that you're coming off mute and asking those as we're going throughout our day today. Anybody have any questions before we start? Does this agenda look good to everyone?
Yeah, it looks great. Thank you.
Beautiful. All right. So let's go ahead and talk about OrbitNote. So OrbitNote is going to be that accessibility tool really built for those really difficult stagnant documents. So things like PDFs or images, it's going to have that automatic OCR scanning to make that really accessible for our students. Now you will start to notice some of the tools at the top of that toolbar are very similar to the tools that they utilize inside of Read and Write. Again, that is intentional. We want our students that know and rely on those tools to have that same consistency and that reliability over into OrbitNote so it functions the exact same, whether you're working in a web document, a web page, or a PDF or an image. We want them to have that very consistent experience no matter what setting that they're in. So inside of OrbitNote, you're going to have all of those known and loved supports that we utilize inside of Read and Write. And you're going to have a couple of additional ones in order to make that really accessible and really make it a living, breathing document for your students to be able to input their responses into. I already spoke a little bit about that integration into your LMS, so we'll go ahead and show that as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and show, we have our OrbitNote dashboard. That's where teachers are able to input some of those PDFs beforehand. It will do that automatic OCR scanning, similar with those images. And I'm also going to show that integration into that LMS. As I'm switching, let me make sure I share the right tab. That's new for Microsoft Teams too, so bear with me while I'm learning that. So I'm going to go ahead and show my Google Classroom here, but again, this functions the exact same way as Canvas, and I actually have a really great support document about Canvas and how you can input your PDFs and utilize OrbitNote as your priority that you want to utilize for it to open up inside of OrbitNote. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that ELA for me and look at that different classwork. I can see I have this Making Inferences PDF here that typically would not be very accessible for my students. We have all those known and loved supports for Read and Write that lay across the top of any other non-standard stagnant document, but we want to make sure that they have all those accessibility supports even in that PDF setting. So as I click that, you'll notice that without any copy and paste or upload, it's going to automatically jump me into OrbitNote here. And I have it really zoomed in. That is a good learning experience for us because every setting that I previously used, it is going to remember that as that student's profile and utilize that when they open up any of their other documents. So I was previously demonstrating for a district that utilizes this with a lot of their students with visual impairment, so they need things zoomed in pretty significantly. So I already had it set to a 220% zoom in. So now every time that students log in and open that up in that other tab, it will automatically open up with all of their profile settings set to place. So let me make it just a little bit smaller here for us to be able to visualize a couple of things inside of here. Again, up at that top, you'll recognize and your students will recognize a lot of those support tools that look extremely consistent with Read and Write. You're also going to see those Read and Write tools embedded and those Equatio supports embedded as well. So really ensuring that whether they're working in a reading heavy, writing heavy, or research heavy document, they have those known and loved supports for Read and Write. Or if we have a math document, they have their known and loved supports from Equatio to also help support them in that area of mathematics. All right. So is anyone not familiar with the tools inside of the toolbar for Read and Write / OrbitNote?
No, I'm familiar with those.
Amazing. Anyone else?
However, I will say some of the staff that we might be showing this to might know of it, but not specifically know. And so if you could show the power of that, just in a quick overview, that I think could be really helpful.
Definitely. All right. So we definitely have some really important tools like the ability to access that information, maybe auditorily, if we have some learners that rely on that auditory feedback, and maybe they're not fluently reading just yet. You're going to be able to highlight, select that play button.
The explorers were hiking to the highest.
And it will read aloud for you. Were you able to hear that aloud for me on Google Teams or
Yeah,
Microsoft Teams?
we did.
Amazing.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. If you come across something that does not have embedded like an alt text or an alt image, but this is a really stagnant document, you have not OCR scanned it, we also do have that screenshot reader that does primarily work inside of Read and Write, inside of maybe just like a web page, but OrbitNote is going to give you even more functionality by having that automatic OCR scanning. Now we do have some additional supports inside of there. Let me go ahead and get rid of my Equatio bar so we have a little bit more real estate there. If we do have some additional supports inside of here to help our students understand the material, like having that dictionary in the picture dictionary. So if I get to a word that I do not know, I can highlight it and I can get that dictionary definition and I can get that picture dictionary definition if I do need any of those resources, reminded back to me. I can use that play button and it will auditorily read aloud that dictionary definition. So again, if your students are not yet fluently reading, but they still need to access that material, they have those play buttons and they can double check their work with that visual component inside of that picture dictionary. I always love, while I'm deleting some of these previous annotations here, I always love to make a call out about how our students that utilize some of these supports don't necessarily, this really helps to support all those other areas of focus beyond just reading. So if this was a really science heavy document or a really social studies heavy document, we want to ensure that our students have access to those materials to help bridge that gap into all of those different content areas. Because if I give a document to my students that is really science or social studies or other content heavy materials, that doesn't necessarily that they don't know science or that they don't know social studies. That barrier might just be from accessing that material. So we want to ensure that we're breaking down that barrier so that our students can access the material in whatever is easiest for them, the least amount of clicks for them, so that we know that they're actually utilizing their accommodations. So many times when I was previously teaching and I asked my students, raise your hand if you want me to come over and read this aloud to you, or raise your hand if you want me to give you a definition of that word. A lot of the times they were too embarrassed to actually utilize those accommodations. So ensuring that everything is right where they're working, right on the spot, and that very small toolbar really shows that students are going to utilize their accommodations even more, access more of that material, and help to bridge that gap to all of those different areas of focus. All right, off my soapbox there. But we also have some additional supports inside of OrbitNote and similar inside of Read and Write, like our screen masking tool. You can adjust this as well. So if you do need to have different colored backgrounds versus different colored highlight in the center, you absolutely can do that. But I love this. I used to manually do this in my classroom, really ensuring that our students are focusing on what's most important and then that text. And additionally, we also have that translation feature. So if you come across a word that you don't know in your in that secondary language, but you want this translated into your home language, you can highlight that word and select that translator, and it will give you that translated definition into one of 60, I believe, languages that we're utilizing right now, again, with that play button for that auditory feedback. Any questions on that reading component? No?
I
None
think
for
you
me,
covered
thanks.
that. Thank you.
Beautiful. All right, thank you. When it comes to writing out materials and annotating onto the document, we also have some additional supports only built into OrbitNote. So inside of here, you can do things like insert an image. So if you're asking students to kind of utilize outside sources in order to describe things, they can insert those images. You can insert material from Equatio. So if I am maybe making a graph here, and I have this graph here, maybe this is a math worksheet, I can insert that graph right onto the page and I can really show my work very simply, very easily. All of those supports that they're utilizing inside of Equatio also can be utilized inside of OrbitNote. When it comes to also inputting text, you have that text feature here. Anywhere that you select on the page, you can write and type those words out. You also have the ability to adjust the color, the font, and the sizing of that font and the orientation of it. So if I'm writing a response about volcanoes, volcanoes erupt, whatever is the answer to that question. I didn't actually read this document, but your students will be able to easily annotate that back onto the page. If your students maybe have some fine motor difficulties, you also can utilize that speech to text here by selecting that. It will dictate as you are inputting that speech and it will type that out for you. So great ways for you to be able to get those thoughts onto paper in whatever way is most helpful and supportive for those students. You can also do things like adding in images and shapes. So if you do need to highlight anything, maybe you're circling, writing lines, different places inside of the text, you can really utilize all of those additional supports inside of your text reader there. Now, when it comes to inputting a fine motor component or a line placement, we also have our pen here. And of course, you can adjust the sizing and the colors for that. So really, however your students are currently working, whether that's with a stylus on an iPad, typing on a keyboard, using their finger to type right out, you have all of those known supports to help support those students however they're learning. All right. A couple of additional materials that are just inside of here for the component for read and write. You will see that pull over like the prediction, that known and loved prediction tool, that prediction engine that helps to really build onto that topic content. So as it's scanning through about volcanoes, it will start to suggest more words related to volcanoes and some great highlighting materials. So if I go through and highlight different words inside of here, again, this also works inside of Read and Write. I can collect all of those highlights or make a vocabulary list about the words and the vocabulary words included inside of that text. Let me share this right tab. You can see how it quickly created that vocabulary list for me with the words that I highlighted, their definition, that symbol supported definition, and a notes field that I can, of course, adjust if I was the teacher to say things maybe like, use this in a sentence, or what does this mean to you? And now this creates a really interactive field for my students to be able to show what they know and input those responses back to me. This is another great learning point that we can show. That is that read and write toolbar up at the top. And you can see we have almost the same similarities of functionality and tools from one to the other, just inside of that PDF stagnant document. All right. So that is a really quick overview of OrbitNote on the Google Chrome or on a computer. Any questions?
I have one question. We have
Yeah.
some students with vision impairments and they need to do inverted text. So the background would be black, the words would be white. Is there an easy way to do that within OrbitNote?
I do know we have the screen masking tool that you can adjust, but that is only going to adjust the highlight in the background. Let me take that question back and see if there is a way that we can invert that text. Let me ask our product director.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I can get that response back to you all. Let me write that down. Any other questions? No? Do you feel like this will be helpful and a good replacement for what you're currently utilizing?
Well, so we have, I think at the end, because this is on essentially our MacBook, right? Our Chrome extension and the canvas within the laptop itself.
Mhm.
So yes, this is great. I think the biggest benefit is the annotation. Like we have all these functions, but not the ability to annotate the document. So that will be helpful.
Mhm.
And I think also too that you can use Equatio within OrbitNote because I was looking at the standard way back in time, the read and write bundle that had read and write and OrbitNote and Snap and Screenshot Reader.
Mhm.
But now we still have Screenshot Reader, we still have OrbitNote, but not the premium. So I think kind of pointing out where the premium differences are in relation to the standard OrbitNote would be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the major differences between those two different capabilities, actually, there's two major ones that would be really helpful for your district in particular, is the automatic OCR scanning. That only comes with that premium version. So if you're utilizing the free for OrbitNote version, you do have to like scan that document. It does take a little while for it to scan, and sometimes it's not as exact as utilizing that premium version. And then the second one that would be really helpful for you all as a district is that crossover into Canvas. That is only available for our premium OrbitNote version.
Okay, so one thing I noticed is, and maybe that's the difference between the free and the premium, when we have gone into a document and we go through OrbitNote, it takes this document the way you see it, but it changes the format. So all the text is there, but it's basically just in lines running down the page.
Yeah. Yeah. So it
Is
scans
that the
just for text
difference?
only.
Okay, okay, that's
Yep.
helpful.
Yeah, good question there. And then to see that crossover, you would just return it back into Canvas, similar to how mine says return to Classroom, and it just takes a scan of that page and sends it back over to your teacher. So both being that automatic OCR scanner and that automatic transfer back into your LMS are going to be those features that are the most difference between the OrbitNote Free and the OrbitNote Premium. We have a great document that shows like the difference between all of the different features, but those are
Oh,
definitely
good.
the two main. But I can send that as a follow-up.
Okay, that'd be great. So when we go with premium and we use OrbitNote, it is going to OCR and keep the content of that document the same, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
correct.
got it.
hmm Not just be text only. Yeah, great questions. Any other questions?
Hello.
Hi.
So, so this sounds great for our students, our older students, our middle school students, our high school students, where yes, the documents are in a Google Drive or something like that, where they're pulling it out. However, for a lot of our, and you may be getting to this next, for our elementary school students, sometimes there are worksheets where that snap and read was very helpful, where they could take the picture,
Mm,
upload it, and go ahead and annotate right there from the picture that was taken.
yeah.
Is there anything within OrbitNote that can do that? Like just is, if a teacher decides to hand something out quickly for them to access.
Absolutely. So that same functionality, instead of it scanning a PDF, it can scan an image. And since you're talking about that with your younger students, I am actually going to show an example of a PDF and an image on my iPad in just a second, if that would be good.
Great. Thank you.
Anything else before I switch us over? No? All right. Bear with me for just a second. Maybe while I'm doing this, Taylor, if you want to go into any like pricing or anything like that, that might be helpful because it will take me just a moment to get everything switched over.
Yeah, so I'm gonna hand it on over to Liz for that. She is our
Great.
pricing queen. So Liz, any information that you have regarding pricing for them would be wonderful.
I have to get that for you. Would it be okay if after this call, I kind of maybe summarize an email and give you a high level pricing?
Yeah, that would be great. So I will say, you know, terrifying with the budget constraints. So if you could send us a district-wide license for the premium Orbit Note, and then your smallest bundle, if you will, like I don't know how that, however many that would be, but that would be helpful.
Got it. Yep, I will get that over to you.
And Sandy, just to let you know, I think our smallest bundle, Liz, correct me if I'm wrong, is 150 students. So it's similar to what your district has for Equatio. But
Okay.
we can always, send you what that number is, but then we can add on top of that and make it, less than a district wide, but more than our smallest. So let us know if you do decide to go with more of a group license, what that number would be most appropriate for your students.
Yeah, that would be, if you can do a several different layers, and then after this I can go in and find out like how many students have iPads, and how many of our students in assistive technology versus the general population. So we can take a look at that.
Yep, I will give you a range of prices.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that help, because I don't know anything about that. That's why I brought the experts on with me for that. So thank you so much. Is everybody able to see my iPad screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. All right. So inside of here, you'll see that I have read and write, and I do have OrbitNote. So when I click into OrbitNote, I actually have two examples here. One is going to be just that PDF document about black holes. So I'll go ahead and pull us into that first, and that keeps the integrity of that image, keeps the integrity of that page. They can swipe from one material to the next in order to see all of the different components found inside of that PDF document. If you do want anything read aloud, you can use that left-hand side.
Schild's work. In 1916, Schwarzschild read Einstein's.
Was everybody able to hear that?
Yes, we could hear it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So you are going to have that same auditory feedback that is found inside of Read and Write and found inside of OrbitNote, but again, just in that iPad type of setting. You do have those other supports like having material translated, so I can translate the entire page if I want to, or just whatever I am holding over and highlighting. I can get that automatic translation into any of our 60 languages there. It also does have those same play buttons for you to be able to auditorily hear that read back to you in that native language. We also do have things like Rewordify automatically built into the iOS version, where that only stands inside of Read and Write inside of the Google Chrome version, but it is here available for the iOS. So anything that is underlined in purple, for those who are not familiar with that Rewordify support, it does give you an automatic synonym to that typically difficult dictionary definition word. So if my student doesn't know what the word warping is, they can select that and it will say twisting. So my students can correlate that warping means twisting and get an automatic synonym for that typically difficult word. Now, pretty much all of the other functionality is very much the same, but you do have the ability to add in pages from your camera and pages from a library. So that is also helpful and additional support that is built inside of that OrbitNote for the iOS version. The only thing I will say that is not available that sounds like is going to be helpful for your district is the Equatio built in for iOS. So I'm going to take that back and see if I can get any additional information from our product directors on if that is a part of our roadmap for the iOS app and getting that Equatio sort of built in, because it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, do a lot of your students that are in grades 2 through 8 that utilize the iPads also utilize Equatio?
We have them across settings. It's we wouldn't want them to have a whole different device if they needed it for that. So that would be helpful.
Okay, I can definitely follow up with the answer to that as well. All right, so I did promise that is an example of pulling over that PDF, but I also did take a really quick picture. You can actually see my pants that I'm wearing right now and a little bit of my cords and my Sharpie that fell on the floor behind it, but that just shows a real life example here. So if we do have teachers that quickly want to take a picture of something and add it into OrbitNote, all of that accessibility support is still built into things like an image, because we want to make sure that our students still have those accessibility supports. Even if it's a last minute thought, we want to make sure that they still have everything that they need to be successful.
Who is this story about?
So they're able to have that read aloud. They can also use all of the editing features. So if I did need to mark up this page, I do have things like being able to pull over that text if I do need to type any text onto the screen. Of course, I can adjust the sizing, I can adjust the font, I can adjust the color. Similar to the functionality inside of OrbitNote for Google Chrome. You also do have that same stylus or that same pen tool. So if they are just circling their answer responses and importing them that way, Also, same thing like with our highlighting feature there as well. Also can adjust those highlights and those colors, very similar to that read and write and that OrbitNote for Chrome version. With this, you also have the addition to insert images from your camera or also from your photo library. So that is one additional support built into the iOS system. One other final thing that is found inside of the iOS system is the ability to add in a note, which I know I utilize notes often myself in my phone and inside of my iPad. So you can add in that comment that is utilizing a note feature inside of here as well. So if you do need to add any additional information, any evidence onto that page, you can add in that note feature there. Any questions?
Just one. So I do notice that sometimes the readability is like when you highlighted and you read who is the story about, it would sometimes mispronounce the word. Is that something that's under development to resolve?
Yeah, so let me go ahead and take that back too and see if we do have a date on that. Just that you all know, our iPad version for OrbitNote is very, very, very new. So I know they're constantly updating and adding to it. So let me see if we can get an update on the voice and the readability. And I can send that over to our product director also and get that response for you.
Great, thanks.
Of course. Anything else? We were able to show that image over and that PDF over. I am going to take back if we can invert the text colors, also send over a follow-up for the free versus the premium version of OrbitNote, and then ask for iOS specifically if we can do Equatio in iOS and the voice and readability for iOS. Did I miss anything?
No, I think you got it.
Anything else from the team?
I think you were also looking about the Equatio on the iPad.
Yes, definitely. Equatio for iOS
Yeah.
and iPad.
Got it.
Amazing. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else from me, if anything does come up and you have questions kind of after the fact or while you are all kind of speaking about this internally, please send those over to Taylor or to Liz, and I can always either send a screen recording of either my computer, my MacBook, or from my iPad in that iOS system. So if you do have questions, I can always follow up either via email or via a screen recording, however best we can serve you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording unless anyone has relevant questions.